Om Namo Manjushriya Namo Sushriya Namo Uttamashriya Soha. Om Namo Manjushriya Namo Sushriya Namo Uttamashriya Soha.
That's as fast as it goes. When the battery's dead, it actually blocks your ear. So it's not dead.
Gen Rinpoche tashdele kukamsang.
Oh yeah, what is
Che gongda teringan zo mi mangbo na nagidu chesang
oh so that.
yure gongda.
Oh yeah.
A lot of
Ina
people.
yang mangbo kangmik nanglo la jagya thone songche zigidu.
Oh yeah, what do you do? Chamba nare, chamba kar nare.
Lare chamba nagidu rinpoche nagidu.
Okay, so that. Oh, menje yabuche, me yabutero.
Lare tuche
Oh yeah. Chamba shita.
Okay. Gen Rinpoche tashdele kukamsang and good morning, Katrina, and a very warm welcome to everyone online. We'll begin with some prayers that you'll find in the chat box as always.
To the teacher and Tao, transcendent destroyer, one thus gone, full destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, nor the world's supreme guide of beings to be tamed. Teacher of gods and humans to you, the Buddha and Tao, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, prostrate make offerings and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies, form supremely fine, wisdom motion like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner the best, supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme signs, face like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not incomparable, wise one, to you I bow. Great, compassionate, protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings. The holy field, endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha Tao. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, flame in a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the four faults, and be delivered from the ocean of psychic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, 4 lands, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma. in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Mandalakam Niryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Oh yeah. Oh, that got good. Oh yeah, yeah. Chizonga bachi besongle. Kaya sorab kunji nyingbi tens. Kaya sorab kunji nyingbi tens. Kaya tamba nambi nga balam. Kendi tangdo nambi yungo di chidan nishi taga shebar sha. Shesung batar sira. Kaya sorab kunji nyingbi tens. Kaya sanje chumde dega sombe. Sorab nambi nyingbu gube. Nyingbi chui diwana shigdo ape. Di karesana. Kaya sorab nyingbi tens. Ninjo dire sore, ninjo. Kibu chungu kapsu na nyawa yita tendre tungele ninjo wa. Kibu drengi kapsu na hada mela sobe. Leda nyumu bewa ki kiwa lang kuwa chije tila. Dware tuto kando kiwa lang na ya. Tunge rang shisha yiba tone tila. Kene kasa, ngudu lami kwa ba. Kowe neta lutan lonju sangmali ya ninjo ki ya tira. O tisungora, kiwa sura kunyi bitas. Tipe ke chibore. Ninju mena ko thandu ke chig marwa. Chi lao thade yago medu tele thakuru samsam samlu shuk chimbu chiyona. E tele thaye thabshi karido tani ti chigra. Thabshi chigra. Te ninju mena ko ke pisiyo marwa. Garazu ta tindir shida. Mune chine lamri tusunali ne. Nyawa yida tindro. Tusu tunge tusu pe yabu keshi keba suyora. Datin san chö shedu shida. Tubo de shegi Maria Shichega. Yaga Shichego de Sita. Jeza Nyawa Yeda Tundu to Mishita Shenge Omara. The Kadas and Mr. Samlin, Titanga Drawame or Samkoda. Timona Jinanga Jessa de Draw Rig to Yora. Sometimes take it, sometimes take it, sometimes take it to take your mother. Mini me, your mother. Teacher. Tatila Nitiganemish. Nima communism, so communism really on this. And it was a purpose somebody Kuba Shivish Tunguda, Kuba Shiva Kubakunata, and a Kashi Pombu Kashi Laguare. Chirazo Shego Mare, Nyoya that the digital Yomare, Yananga Edam Bamjagare. Telekea Yomare. Me in a military, you in a mission, Matashi. Nyawa that in the Jigmare. Drew them the Drujigito and dread them the Dragigito, Shanda Jigum do Asagre. Love the child. What is sort of say? Nazute Dremerage some coda. I couldn't never return to her. Demutas are a chemato. Angazutin at something little your some comodo. Take over your. Ti koya tunda lamri tuzuna kesh kya sambar. Ti shena go yomar. Ala tichla to manda ya.
So here To begin, as Jelam Tsongkhapa has said, the very essence of all the Buddha's teachings, the path that is praised by the noble bodhisattvas, and the entrance for all fortunate ones desiring liberation, to the best of my ability I shall now set forth. So here, this first line that refers to the essence, the kind of condensed essence, the sort of nectar of all of the Buddha's teachings, this is referring to an attitude of renunciation, and not just a kind of renunciation from the rebirths as in the three lower realms, although for the being of small scope that is included, wishing to avoid a rebirth not just in the hell realms or hungry ghosts or as an animal, but recognizing that all of samsara is in the nature of suffering and thereby wanting to get out of that, right? And so having this attitude of renunciation is extremely important, because if we have a sense that the place we are isn't good or the situation that we are in is something that is bad, then we are going to look for a method to be able to get out of that. And so here, this is something that is, again, really important for us to generate, this attitude of renunciation. And so here we can see that the kinds of sufferings that are experienced, particularly those of the lower realms, are explained in detail in the stages of the path literature. And again, it's not in order to be able to scare us or something, but these explanations are given in order to have us recognize that we cycle through these various types of rebirths through the six realms. And so often people don't want to talk about those kinds of sufferings. Like they just want to sort of set that aside and not think about it and have this sense of like, oh, well, I'm a human now, and so I'm going to be born as a human again and again and again. And so we sort of look at things like the animal realm as sort of like we're watching a movie, like that's something other than what could happen to us, utterly unconnected from our own experience or what could potentially come to us in the future. We have this feeling of like, oh yeah, we're just going to be born as a human again and again. And so when the Chinese came into Tibet, just as a kind of story to illustrate this, they really looked at the Tibetans as being quite stupid. They would say, oh, you talk about these other realms of the hell realms and hungry ghosts and animal realms. We could just, sort of eliminate these through dropping an atom bomb on them. You guys aren't going to be born there. It's like in the same way that when we plant a barley seed, a barley sprout is what comes about. Humans are always born as humans. And so they looked at the Tibetans as being quite stupid, as if like, well, how are you're human now, so you're always going to be human in the future. What are you talking about these other realms for, and describing the kind of sufferings that one endures there? And so here, again, the reason that this is explained extensively within the stages of the path literature is because it's not something utterly unconnected to us, right? We often look at them as like, oh, that's a nice story, a nice sort of movie of something that happens to other people. But the reason that this is explained is because we cycle through these six realms. We could potentially be born in such a realm as a hell being or a hungry ghost, an animal.
Oh yeah. Oh, the Indica soda. Razo chi Jawalan to San Tamada. So I know I that on the Sobatazul Kia or Desam. They cannot to make under those Tandakan Musum Tonta. Alenia Yeda to Masam Tandulia to make under the Ra. Yeshe Tembo by Shandy Kursu, Garche Chalana, she pitches to Kaine Chachoda. Tinashin Konya Yeda Tandutus and Ardu Madon Bemara. Titung Chadwa de Mila Yusungda. May Chigni Segni Shikungi Mabudwa. Kane Tane Tichan Shikungi Mabuwa. Oh, Tinashin Shichi said to Kangachedova. What is it near Tunga Chadwa, the Marazumila Yusungara? What did you to Sole Kina? Tunga intended to do some other some Guyara. And the taking as some Gumara, so when a lot of Chicoms and a Kavja Kumgira. Latin or Jurgaritin, Sankan teachers. Takiram Mobania, Omagina, Yoyata, and do get in the young that's when I send the Conquerora. So bettely gives our to Mishita, young Yogu, Tion Medusa, and it to let and do some restriction beyond Gora. Or did Gasoda, more. Tomatoes and Jimmy Sambora, Chonel Lambrichin with that Yabuora Misse. tindu shira yesh keba samotuna tudu sam. Ane tele gune kene nyanga du asam sarish. Soa chileba chagu yara. Nganzu ti soa shira lebge yomare. Ti kechi shure. Nyawa yida tunduli kete. Tambu te. Ti megi tundali ne karishi wese ta. O ti de sam gudo ngaza. Shu she situ sa kyo chima shina kune ti kyanjala. Meki esi ti shegyo mara. Sen delia soso tewa. Shenle tsawa pa pemba trup shene. Sen delia nang mida kanga. Tewa yonga tiki yonga tunda shegyo ra. Tende shebe yonan ti rebu na midalia chima kyo. Sambula ane lada mida nyawa yita tunduli kigri ese. Rebu na midali ti yongure ese go ra. Tata koe de sen delia tewe tundali ti kore shegyo ra. Mato kyo shima chanja se sen de kar chene se tende shegyo mara. O ti de kasura. Megi chula soba. Nyawa ita tondole kisi kyutu su tele tende yone tele kyuti pandu shigira. Tiene ne shanla sawa pandu yunguda. Shanla sawa chene kene nyawa ita tondole kigore tunge kanga yungora. O ta shanla ne veri di sani shikimu du sam. Pento veri di kare na tuku du sam. Meche kora tende shikere na. Randa nang mita namju dodi chisada kanga cholo tadanda. Soso nga ke trado drensim. Nyota nyododa, semki simda nyododa. Ene mishanda le rangi mwene tukute da mijibu soya tende nyonyu shagra. Tende chane te rangi tewa te ukara. Hindu sanje ke ate. Pemba da tewe shidu chu songso da. Kyo mambula pemba da kyo mambula tewe shidu chu she uresi. Pemba se de maomba le na mitile songwara. Pemba. Tewe shidu tanda tewe tanda songwara. Sendi chiso kora tewa yoya nangmida soso kaga sema kibu yoya. Kibu yoya dila lui ki kibu tan sem ki kibu cha mangcha da sem chuni mi kibu chagdo. Tinga zungu sum tode gdo chiso tata. Pencho chanja yoya ne pe sem li tunge mebe chigu ne ten degra. Pencho chanja lui soya tanda ten to pe pe sum sobo yoya na. Sem ki sem le te tili maa ra zungu do. Tinga zungu sum de tugu yoya. Sawa tende me yoya to ta sungu yoya. Tende chese te karen te kontro kwe te peke chimbo de to tambuda o tende koa kasura nyawa yeta tonduli kena degma resam kyo sambu kyancha rawa chene laya yo ma resam kyo ngamba tonduli ke sibi resam ti rangda rangi titu tan rewa sonza rangi le kenji kiti chili takira rangi titu tilia rangi rawa che me shenda chige wang che te nane nyanga chimbo shidara tida ke yonshin se yo mara ne chene kyukan ne kyute ta timbe debu yongur mata ene kyule ke te mo shenda se yo mara te pe ke shembore ne song tunge samurta o te la ke kyute ene miki wa chu shala chawa pambatire sambra o te chawa pambate chebe ne chente la ra te wa 저 신대와 교화심만나 미기되고 야본용에 이거 근데 이지 정선에는 그 며칠에 근데 추주지 또다 되고 뭐 사고 말어 근데 추주지 또다 며칠 시다 땡도 땡게 말어 근데 추주지 또다야 근데 되고 싶은데 사고 말어 어디서다 기부 총을 삼을 때 담보 개첨벌에 나라지 기부 총우데 개총시지 그래 나라다 근데도 저 남기시 안다랴 소선들사 대 다마도 같이 양자 총자를 겸주에 소원을 고도 뇽람도 단다 직체 근데 연하다네 뒤 양시로 갖고 팀에서 하는 뜻송비가라 당부 시딘들다 저는 이번에 선반들을 알람트를 르바셔도 르바 메고는 총자자 연하다 당분에 송고고 말아 사교를 되는 제부기억을 말하듯이 뭐 되는데 되게 좀 시다라 뒷장장은 기부 청매 쳐대 원에 양딱 같이 수단 틈바 시에는 밑단단 데버를 살다. 내 겨와 심마하다 미 겨와 빠질랑거라. 겨와라 꿈지 셔버디 겨와 꿈지 되게 레부디 겨와 심마데 쳐쳐라 차와 방바 담바주에 꿈지 들려도라. 아저는 겨와네 겨와 공네 공도 앞에네 마찬가지 드모거디 온 거라. 뒤에 띵아서 계신 분이 삼고도 야 What is love?
Mm. So here, when we take rebirth, we have to recognize that we could potentially be born as a hell being, as a hungry ghost, as an animal. And really, although we aren't able to see the realms of the hell beings and hungry ghosts, we can see the realm of animals. We can understand the kinds of sufferings that they endure, of being sort of stupid, being exploited and used for their skin, for their labor, for their meat, and so forth. And so here, other than they're not being seen, we can't say that the hell realms and hungry ghost realms don't exist. We can think about the kind of sufferings, the way that they are described within the stages of the path literature, how, you know, in the hell realms, you might be burned alive, you might be chopped to pieces and so forth. And we can see sort of pieces of that suffering within the human realm, but kind of imagine what it would be like to actually experience being born in such a place. And often we sort of set that aside. We don't think about it. We're sort of like, oh yeah, I'm a human now, and maybe I'll be a god, and then maybe I'll just become a Buddha. But really, by contemplating the various sufferings that we could very well experience in the future, should we take rebirth in such realms, then that strengthens our wish to be freed of those. That really gives us the impetus to pursue actually avoiding such a rebirth. And so here, contemplating the kinds of sufferings that one could potentially experience in such a rebirth as they are laid out in the great stages of the path, it's really good for us to think about to think about this, even if we don't do so like really extensively in depth, to think about it such that we have a feeling, like a feeling of, I really want to make sure I avoid such a rebirth. And so here we need to understand, I mean, the purpose of Dharma, we talk about Dharma practice really being for future lives, but it is something that is beneficial to us in this life as well. It's not just about gaining a good rebirth in the future, but it's also beneficial. It brings happiness to us in the present. By engaging in positive actions, by avoiding those kinds of harmful actions, we are going to bring good to our lives here and now. We will bring happiness to ourselves and those around us, and in the future lives experience the kind of ripening results that come from such beneficial actions. And so here, if we want to avoid the kind of negative rebirths, rebirths in those lower realms or a bad future, then we need to avoid the kind of causes that bring those about, particularly abandoning the 10 non-virtues and getting rid of, however much we are able to, any sort of activity that causes harm. And any sort of activity that is beneficial to others is something we should strive to engage in. I mean, in us as an individual, when we experience anger and jealousy and desire and pride and so forth, that causes us suffering here and now. And the more that we decrease those kinds of attitude, the happier we will be in this very life, as well as creating causes for a good kind of future rebirth. And so here, the Dharma, again, is something that is explained for the benefit and happiness of beings. The benefit is in terms of the ripening results that we experience in the future, but happiness too is what it brings about in this very life. And when we think about happiness and suffering, there's both mental and physical happiness and suffering, but really our mind, when our mind is disturbed, that is the greatest cause of our suffering. And when our mind is happy, that really brings about true happiness. We can see that even those who are, say, extremely wealthy, who have lots of possessions and are well endowed in that way, that doesn't alleviate completely the mental suffering that they experience. They might even have more mental suffering due to the wealth that they have. And so recognizing that the Dharma is really important for us in the present as well as in the future. And we recognize that whatever kind of experiences we are going to have in the future are connected to the actions that we do now. Our future happiness and suffering, both in terms of where we are born as well as future kind of circumstances that we encounter, are dependent upon the actions that we do now. It's not as though there is some being that is going to give us happiness and suffering. That would be really kind of scary. But actually, actually it is the case that the causes that we create are going to bring about like results. And so we need to think about the causes as much as we are able to avoid any kind of acts that bring harm to others, and as much as we are able to engage in positive beneficial actions towards others, then we are going to create our own happiness. We are going to ensure that we're not born in the lower realms, and we're not going to be subject to those kinds of sufferings. And so the contemplation of the being of small scope, of recognizing the importance of our own actions in terms of protecting our ethical conduct, this is something that we know how to do, right? Often we think that we can sort of jump ahead, like, oh, I want to go to those higher stages. I don't want to just be at the first stage, but I want to go to the second, the third, the fourth. Well, we can't just jump past this. This is the foundation upon which everything else is built. And so if we really have a strong foundation of the contemplations of the being of small scope, this is something that is so important. As much as we habituate ourselves to avoiding harmful actions and bringing about beneficial actions, we also not only experience the good ripening results of that, but we carry that habituation with us into future lives and have that as a foundation upon which we can build our practice.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, then do so that. Oh, today, Lunga Yesum be corner on Namju. Message to thing as a messinali on the Sera to do left with what you there. Kaneke shed it down, simply sometimes the Luigi Cholam to live door. Oh, thing you might have about is sometimes, raw. Shall it saw by the shall saw of Jenna? Shall it to me on good some Gora? Shall it to me on good some? This also me never can to me on good me give you good. Shall it to me on good tea, you marry some tea, she's on Gora. So all she's on Gora. Kajade tunga chuna chunsa sato na shi samtana koti neba paya da tindike samlu kumara sa pajode tunga yungure sam sawage nyingji chili shi sungyora sanje temba nyingji raptu chawase tambu shi sunsa til sungyora o te duka sora mili tunga yungure digmare sam o ti tondale ate chigora ti yundene chiale a tunga chuna digmare sam pendo tubete ao chiale tewa yungure Pento ko kabu yungure sam Tito da ko tichi wara pemba tuete. O ti inde ko Tito da mesike jete susu lenga yesum tona tele tona che. O dai te sa mai ba kyo thoma me ba ne te chere sam te zu ti ba du ta go ra. Te chamzile shi su ne chawa pa pemba tuete samba sambu chen te ba da du wara. Te ba da e tra shete. Na ba sanje ba ye sanje su ne chukaga soku tune yagmare tagmare sokul soso kale chema tichibu tagmare se semge mil chawajane tikbasa yora mangshade mil chawa pa da pemba do ti tikbata agri songora tikbata e so de chamba da niji chanju sem tele la ba me songdo sa ti tikbata zo ta do yora kyonga massage tikba e tanda soso samdo kyawa thoma me ban tikba mabusa yore sa Tiso mandiri samnane ngama sabe tibo mambu taadura. Eni tsendi kumshilia ko kewa samlu shuk chimbu. Sawa panya da pamba tuya samlu shuk chimbu yungudwa. Ane maashi suna nyawal maa yungro sina duyi sina doya yungmarwa. Kulad mil kyudi saasidu lada mil kigra. O ti indu ta ti tolia suzu tandune. O ta lada milaya sa meze kora ti shisune. Tā mēsā nīli tōngi yuwa māngbō yore kia ka nāsi la soba tēsā yore tā mīla ya ka ngē sōn la tē 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 ya kushi tā rē tē ina tōngi duwa samsā tsēdi tōngi mī tōngi samla tā rā lāi tōngi samla tā lāma ya kuwa la kēshi jē tē la kēwa, gēwa, nāwa, shiwa, dewa, tsēdi mēduwa tōtuwa tā tōngi māngbō yore ngūsum ñam yore ngā rā tō nyingbu kē mē kēsi ngūsum ñam yore samla mātāng mātō shire O tiende tende yungu ye samsa ti samtana. Ani meda apada roa. O tende saba kumeda tende samtana. Te kya chima tarwa toya ki shidi sungudwa. Tarwa toya ki shidi sungudwa. Sawad masu tsikba kyagi wara, tsikda kyagi wara. Tarwa shitsukwa imbe sungudwa. Nga ye paya, kondu paya, chado paya, samba santana. Tarwa shitsukwa wara. Tende reji yaari dunya tarwa to urmada Tobya Koja Toyashio Mara. Oti the any Kawachima Slata me Koban Tobya, Tia Cheda Timba, some to Shuk Chimbuyosa, and it Tarwa Tobya Shi, Tamja Chimbe Koban Tobya Shila Sobakanga, Chendele, Paksaya Bushasha, the Nete Kone Kondia Pedora. Or Tindration any Tarwa Tamja Chimbasia, Andrea, some Tangurmado, Tobya Koja Taga Station, and it's Tobya Koja Chilabia, Dressa, some Nambati, Madira. 소소 레이하고 있는 소소 타고요라 어디 손이야
So here, when we think about really what's important is what we are doing with our body, speech, and mind, our three doors. That is the kind of where the rubber meets the road in terms of our practice of Dharma. And really, we should do this on the basis of recognizing that when we create harm, when we do harm, we bring about suffering to others. And when we do things that are beneficial, we bring about their happiness. And so it's really the case that the Buddha Dharma is based upon this foundation of love, looking at other sentient beings as feeling beings. If we instead look at them as sort of like inanimate objects, like rocks or stones, and we're like, yeah, it doesn't matter what I do to them, whatever, we don't care, then really that is a wrong way of looking. The Buddha Dharma is really based upon an increase, the development of this attitude of love and compassion, wherein we think that, well, if I do things that are harmful, that brings about suffering to others. And therefore we pay attention to what we are doing with our body, speech, and mind, whether it is harmful or whether it is helpful, based upon this recognition that it brings suffering and happiness to others who are feeling beings. And when we have that kind of attentiveness to our actions, we will also be by the way, sort of purifying the kinds of negativities that we have accumulated since beginningless time. We recognize that in countless previous lives, we have engaged in negative actions. And by transforming our activities of body, speech, and mind toward that which is positive, eliminating those kinds of actions that are negative, that are harmful, and bring about suffering to others, we naturally purify and cleanse those kinds of negativities that we have accumulated in the past. And we can't, as the Buddha has explained, we can't purify our negativities through some sort of external process of washing or something, cleaning that away, but rather it is by developing a counteracting mind. It is by eliminating that sort of harmful attitude and developing our wish to benefit others that we are then able to ensure that we have a good rebirth in the future. And so this is the kind of initial level, the foundation. And again, the foundation is this attitude of love and compassion that extends to other sentient beings, and really a wish to not harm them and to be of benefit to them. And then we contemplate, though, that even if we are to, through our good acts, ensure that we have a good rebirth in the future as a human or a god, we can see that this is still in the nature of suffering. Like, we know from direct experience the kinds of sufferings that we endure as a human, the sufferings of birth, aging, sickness, and death, the sufferings of meeting with that which we don't want and losing that which we do want. And so we can think about the kind of sufferings of a god as well, but we have this direct experience of what it is to suffer as a human, and thinking about then impermanence, the fact that we are in this kind of situation wherein we are going to constantly be subjected to new sufferings. It is there that we build the foundation of striving for liberation, of achieving liberation, like in the way that we build a foundation and then build up the walls on that. As much as we recognize the kind of sufferings of that are created through our various afflictions and make an effort to reduce them, our anger, our pride, our jealousy, and so forth, we are setting down the kind of imprints of liberation and the future imprints of the state of complete enlightenment. We shouldn't think that these are things that sort of happen instantaneously, that all of a sudden you're just boom, liberated, or that you become a Buddha just like that. But rather it is through this process of laying down imprints that we are able to eventually achieve those kinds of goals. And it is through this kind of practice of a basis of ethical conduct, of abandoning harming others and benefiting others, and the foundation of that, then we build on an understanding of impermanence and so forth. We shouldn't expect there to be sort of like, oh, the Buddha just blesses you and all of a sudden you're enlightened. It's not, that's not the way that it happens.
Oh yeah. tende samlu tadu tende kibun drengi samlu tande midabada tungyawada ro ane tongba nye se arab tuzu keche yungu ra midabwa samlu ta ro ane tungay nata kwa tungay nata nalu nyawa yeda tandu kya mare me la lama kawa kena ko tungay jira shi chang yinba tongma meba ne tandu se kor yon tungay nya 다 단다도 스타메고 코란 데레아 섬들 섬로코나 네 콜이야니 좀 그네 지 세단 데버시 용거라 오늘 타레시는데 가르모 거시고네 시에고야시레도 아마도 베냐가레 삼사 소소소소 소알레그라 딜레트 산테네 가르소라 디던달이야 미다 동에 동 담에서 꼼치들의 삼루탄데 소소심리야 유한도라 또또 유한도라 요한도 내가 세 라와 남주 삼대 고민도 아삼 나다 나시 신자 제테서 시 강기전도 신자 제스서 그 남주 삼고에 대답이 같이도 메도 아삼자 내가 다음에 봐 삼도 스타로 네 메다 봐 삼도 하시네 심리아 요한도에 주고 있어라 심리아 요한에 전도서 다 나시 신자 제스 유대 메데 텔레 신자 좀 들어요라 아니 가서 생애를 내지 가서서 신자께서 나를 고해서 신자께서 유토줄에 동반이 삼로다 주주서 시담에 소소 남주 삼분의 멤버들 삼로 코르소나 텔레 신자된 요르도에 요사라한테 매부차네 신지 매지 신자 단단해시 대뱅에버 매도 왔음 매부차네 착바세대 매부차서 놓았음자 뒤인데네 착배 유면은 더 유한요 말아 고르야요 말아 소소 착배 신자 지사 지자 딘디만데 전에 고르 용거라 아니 고르대 지대 지매버 소야도서 네 고에 유디 고데 지매버 소야도서 미모셔야 돼 삼들에 소소 양자 먹고데 심지어 현대 밤마다 인들을 써보 대조인의 찍버려 삼사 공조시 제는 제지 다른 도와 삼사 뽑을래그라 인도래그라 어디에는 심지어 탐제에서 삼을 거르고요라 담부 소소 코아나 단날도 야고 삼다나 심지어 탐제에서 삼을 용토다 랑신 코코용 거라 지기실레 병거리도 어디에는 내 심지어 탐제 동에다 자와서 대화다 대우도 소시치고 삼다는 말을 하셔서 아니는데 마시 진대세라 도서 강가 삼고요라 어디에는 다 심지어 탐제해야 돼 개발해봐대 심지어 수인의 집이지 랑다 나주다 남미세 짜초르시라 아니 롱바레 소소 롱바 짜자 신자 잠불레 코란 미카가 집어차라 대체되네 남게 대개별 심지어도 대완돌라 동에 메도바인 신자들라 정말 찍버리 삼고 요라 단단한 줄이 수제 13 코드에라 삼로 신주고 강인한 아주스 춘중에서 연텔레 시스 시스 현대 상당 계속 신의를 소대요라 그래서 심지어 팀에게 차고요라 탐절이야 어디에는 영문만 보시고 너도요라 심지어 탐제에서도 다 심지어 인버스미 개발을 차라 소소 삼로 나야 수인의 인과 라인의 돈도인의 소소 펜터인의 내가 쟁게네다 내가 때문에 가가자 내가 쟁게 요아를 펜타고 요아를 장장게 요마로 어쩐데 개발을 통해요라 산 개발 뒤에는 심지어 탐제에서 미보더라 모두 심지어 관광 오시 것이 스르르르서 소설을 전다 줍시에 이렇게 두에 요마라 어디에 네 심지어 탐제 동안에 들었던 시험도 삼사 대체도 따라 그것이 연대 군대지 가서 직접 두도 삼네 근데 사로 신시자리 신자의 야르야르시 란도르인데 탐제 신게 삼바삼부 탈신게 시럽 탈신게 탑대 시럽이가 탈신베 사이지 고반지 도와샤고도 삼 어딘데 삼로 코트여요라 이엔데 어딘데 삼로 따지 심지어 탐지가 된 쪽에 깨고서 연대 군대지 가서 좋아하셔서 대체도 단단히 깨나르르네 세바시겠어 연대 나르르네 교리 깨바시겠어 대체도 네 퇴바시게 삼바시게 결로 꿈지시겠어 대단단히 chuy년기 위해서 chuy년만 내시 삼로 소소 삼로 따게 해서 뒤중저 삼중 Sambana Shaha Kosuna Hakosan Masha Yana Yandu Samrutages. Yana Yandu Samrutana, Yana Yandu Yakon, Kona Kod Pede Chunir, this Samtangura. Simply your lesson get there. Chambatanji, Karina, Yaja Karistan was Yana Yandu Comede Madusanda, Jugo Marme Saguma Kesha Marwa. Yanja Commission could session the name measure. Consider doing a that you start no down. Rangi ringda ngama tu kom ni yajen rwa. Sa tiko kom le sempi veda so rangi ringda ngama te ringda koran trabu se kom se yar pen ru de sera. Ti ma do tabi shenda yo ma. Ti katse somse kom ki na chechen yajen rwa me ba se yo ma gara samle na te ko da. Katse samle ta na ngema na shi de te samsang ma tur rwa so de so de yo ra. Ina ko yar ru yo de te ne yo ma ra. Candy Kane Bahaku to Sataka, drop me do some Sigda, Matosiko Yaja Madosi Yamar, Kaze, Samutana, never said to the Masunuko, to Jins Town of Marma to Gura, or Tiende, or Tendation, and Sambia Tamja to get Kagose, and they could let concert in Jura Shatisha, Nimer Tit and Samuta Shangi in some. Oh, Tit and Dal Tebasi in some, Tebet, so Samutang in some. Te yana yadu shako sune yana yadu kumgi insam. Ti chene ni tarshiba yungu de insam. Ti soso le tengda chi taje guda. Maa bana kaze gona tanda rao tuya yoma te. Ngeba do chigi insam samna pe lap chenpo. Ane jawa lap chenpo sauro. O tinde samutane. Simja tamje ke tuya tunge kien kuse yunde kunde ji kansa chi juwa chagi insam. Te se du tanda na ti tunda teba tan samba kompa chene. Juin te tunda la chu nyagi samutangi samda. O tinde kunu se tam sabar shu standis. Mantas ha.
So here it is then on the foundation of the contemplation of the being of small scope that we then move to the being of middling scope, contemplating impermanence, the kind of suffering nature and emptiness and so forth, recognizing that it's not just the lower realms that are in the nature of suffering, but even those higher realms of rebirth as a human or a god entails being in the nature of suffering. And it is the case that we cycle uncontrollably, taking up one set of aggregates and casting that off and going again and again through that. And so really, when we contemplate this, we should do so to the point of having a feeling about it, a felt sense of the kind of situation that we are in, and a real feeling of renunciation, of wanting to get out of this cycle of suffering. And this is then where the contemplation of emptiness and of selflessness comes in, recognizing that when we contemplate in this way, we have the ability to transform our mind from the kind of ignorance that grasps at a self, that clings to this I, that as if it were truly existent, as if it were sort of autonomously, objectively existent in and of itself. And it is due to that clinging to an I that we then cling to like mine and my side, my people, and so forth. And it is then on that basis that we generate a kind of attachment to our own side and an animosity for the other. And so here, when we are able to recognize that there is no such I and eliminate that kind of clinging toward an I, we eliminate that kind of attachment towards my body, my friends, and so forth. And so too, eliminate the kind of animosity toward the other, the aversion towards those that are considered to be other. And so we have to give rise to this kind of understanding that actually all sentient beings are the same, in that they all, although we have sort of relationships of familiarity with some of them now, it is the case that they have all been close to us. So giving rise to this kind of confidence and mental fortitude that recognizes not only do we have the ability to eliminate our own cycling within samsara, but we also have this kind of commitment to others, thinking that, well, it's not right to just think about myself alone. alone. It's not just suitable to only think of my own needs, but actually to recognize that all sentient beings have acted kindly towards me. And so here we can naturally sort of bring this about through coming to understand, to look at all sentient beings without sort of partiality, just from the point of there being sentient beings, being those who feel. And so thereby we're able to extend this kind of understanding, a wish to free all sentient beings, not just those in our immediate family or just in our country or in our continent, but those, or even just all the humans in the world, but rather extend to all sentient beings equal to the extent of space. And so we can get rid of the kind of partiality, the attachment and aversion that we have, and really recognize all as being equal, whether they're human or whether animal or whether a god, whether it's someone who has benefited me or hurt me, we can see them all as equal and recognize that they all deserve to be freed from suffering. And we have this ability to generate a more and more sort of positive kind-heartedness, love, and compassion that extends to all sentient beings. We have this sort of capacity. And when we really understand that capacity and give rise to a kind of confidence, a kind of mental fortitude, then the wish arises to ourselves become a being who has eliminated all faults and developed all good qualities, who has brought to its culmination method and wisdom, who has perfectly developed the ability to be of benefit to others. And we give rise to that kind of wish within ourselves. May I myself become a perfectly complete Buddha, one who has eliminated all faults, who has developed all good qualities. And in order to strive toward that state, I am going to begin from now, trying to eliminate every sort of faulty mind that I have and develop every good and positive quality. And I do that through first hearing the Dharma and then having heard that and reflected upon it. And it's not just hearing this once, but hearing it again and again and contemplating it again and again, meditating, integrating it into my mind that this is possible to achieve the state of Buddhahood. It is the nature of our mind that the more that we habituate to something, it can become more and more ingrained, actually without any sort of limit. This is the natural capacity of our mind, that what we develop within it, what we meditate on or habituate it to, is going to increase more and more. Those kinds of sort of minds of a similar type, the more that we integrate them into our mind, it is the case that that will grow stronger and stronger. The more that we contemplate the sufferings of samsara or the love and compassion for other sentient beings, it increases and develops. This is just the nature of the mind. We don't need to quote the verse, but this is something that is established, that we have the ability to develop really without any kind of limit. It's not as though we can just sort of take some kind of medicine to develop our love, to increase that, but it's through developing moments of feeling love towards all sentient beings that will increase and develop. It's through seeing the faults of our afflictions and reducing those, that those will naturally decrease, right? And so sometimes we might have this thought of like, oh, well, it doesn't feel like I'm improving. It doesn't feel like my mind is transforming, but we should have faith in the process that our mind is constantly transforming. The more that we habituate to something, the more that it is going to increase and develop. The more that we reflect upon something, that is going to develop more and more. And we have the ability, our mind has this capacity to bring that to its complete culmination in the state of Buddhahood, to become a being who has eliminated all faults and developed all good qualities. And we shouldn't think that this is going to happen in a short period of time, but really have the kind of mental strength and fortitude that says, this will definitely come about, and however long it might take, I'm going to pursue that path. I am going to pursue eliminating individual faults and developing good qualities such that I myself may become a perfectly enlightened Buddha in order to be able to benefit all sentient beings. And for that purpose, I'm going to listen to the Dharma, contemplate on it, meditate on it in order to achieve that state for the benefit of all sentient beings. So please, let's set a good motivation for listening to the Dharma.
Oh, yeah, that they listen. Oh, that they are going to show look. 2020 嘛，哦，2020，嗰啲咧就nobody 做吧，講嘢啫，我哋當冇啲亂嚟講嘅。當冇啲佢哋先咧。
Venerable.
그때 대화 첨부도 대화 중후 대야 메시나서 다 된다. 대화 첨부다 개 첨부된데 주변에 된다. 대화 충주도 돌려 당고 그래서 동해도 충주 연구나 연구 그래서 대화 첨부된다. 디시거라. 대야 메시나서 대네 내 시베도 치단 직전이야. 멤버도 그 나서 또 속이 집을 교회 된다리야. 내가 그때 가서 샥주지알 소바로 진짜 매 사카고 진짜 사고에다 진짜 용거라 진짜 제고도 와서 거라 시외 tendu member tagini mishimbe mela soba chimbarsheba chimituase ande tezun diga marvesi ora te tawari gwa mayimbe chungi tendu chimedan shi sumba tarchaos ta tewa chimbu tenda yuna te tenda chungi le tangun mato tewa chungju jigi tenda liya chimbu le tanga te chikyo mare sumda te chilamna tambo
둔주도 칙 말베.
dinjire기 dinji dinjidire dinji dinjidire
Karisa
dinji dinji
둔주도 니이나.
dinji
Tunji be.
뭐
Tare.
둔주도 니 얘기래라. 내나 당월 미리발랑아. 둥아 충 그냥 첨부 셀 리파 디 말베.
Meshinge de tatike. Tunji kajesa. Tunji be.
둔주도 칙디 사송이네. 둔주도 니 고추도두스.
Ya. De kembe. Ni do. Tunji chen ta ya do do. Ya, de chi kyasha de ta kyasha. De sha. Ta tunji de do.
라레.
De ta dare. Ba karisa do sena. Kachi digechi tekwa chembolo tawara. Tawa rik desi ta tiba chenpo te yagu mido si ti kemele ki nyendu tingi yorwa. Nyendu deba se ti nangbe chukda mawa nal ya. Kachi ki ti tiba chenpo kelingi omarwa. Ti kasi do si. Kachi dige do tiba chenpo la tawa rik desi. Ane go tawa la sobe kachi chenpo mesube chirdan. Samu toba kawe chirsinas. 아니 특별 첨부전에 심정이 되도 소소르다 소다 강가 침바당 구도 하세 아니 동반이 세 지시도 하세 대배 곡하고 지 동반이데 근데 삼루도는 가야 맹게리 소르거라 근데 티니니가 디 야구메도서 탑기 전에 상부인세 상마소소고다 강가 심정이 되도 땅군다 대야고 말했으거라 엔테네시아 테네루 타두디 또에 돈달이야 동반이 다 매봐 동반이 다로 최탐제 동반이 세대 공부티 꼭하고 이 거나 야고 말했지 최다 농기 삼겨라 가게 매게 적도 없어 어때 선생 특별 전부터 야고 메도스 특별 전부 송샤부터 산제 까마레스 그 치수 중에 특별 전부 가서 공부를 두다 대속이야 근데 소샤를 마도 그 산제 까마레스 어딘데 시거라 미리테세 고통하라 소베 가제 전부 메시베시다 사무토카베 치시다 어디지 라면 담부추 떡과 거야 돼야
So here, just again establishing where we had left off, and I believe it's with verse 372. So here there are some that sort of disparage or despise the great vehicle, thinking that or asserting that that isn't the actual teaching of the Buddha. So some of the like Shravaka tenant schools, those philosophical schools, don't accept that the Mahayana is the teaching of the Buddha. And so here, this comes under the first topic is that it's although there might be a little bit of suffering, it's logical or it's right to sort of endure that because it dispels a great suffering. And so some might say that, well, it's right to have this kind of animosity toward the great vehicle because on the method side, it involves engaging in austerities, such as like giving away your own body, giving up your own head, and so forth. And those kinds of great austerities are unbearable. That's not something that someone could possibly do. And on the kind of wisdom side, this profound is difficult to understand. So they are looking at the teachings on emptiness and misunderstanding that, thinking that, well, if you teach that nothing, they understand emptiness to mean sort of like there's nothing whatsoever, that it's extremely difficult to understand. And some fall into the extreme of nihilism, thinking that there's nothing whatsoever. So some say that these teachings of the Mahayana are not the speech of the Buddha. They're only something that was sort of made up by Nagarjuna and so forth. And both in terms of the method side that involves these unbearable, like difficult acts of generosity and so forth, as well as on the wisdom side and the difficulty of understanding emptiness, that it's right to have some kind of animosity toward the great vehicle.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. That is our deal with that. Do get do ne say so I say. Do not say of chun ya tell a man to do ten ya send a try a touchy chair the one. The do get do ne say so. Chitter major lashes, maybe shunginalia to the shed was go. And then to make it young, me pemba, sorry, so she guess. To me, those young by Yenayako, Shandak, Bekang, the Chimbu Mambuchi, Sego Yuna, then the to me change young when I take off, so good, they say. Don't show this go. To make it young, me pemba, sorry, so she guess me pemba, to me, changes in Yane, take a social pemba, man, get it by Sene. And it touch him but you but it's a chishing gag or my race or chishing gas. Oh, this you love.
So,
Yeah, oh,
so then,
yeah, oh, the Talish.
Gondagin. So here then in verse 372, it says, physicians say that poison may be eliminated with poison. So how is it contradictory to say that suffering may eliminate something unhelpful? So here there are some illnesses where like for example, there are some sort of toxins within the body, and that can be eliminated through ingesting something that is poisonous or toxic. And so too, when it comes to then, as a physician might treat such an illness with something that is poisonous, so too, by enduring a little bit of suffering, it is possible to eliminate a great deal of suffering. And so therefore, it's logical to endure that little bit of suffering in order to eliminate something that is much greater.
Oh, yeah. Don't ever learn to yeah. That tell you, and as I gave it to Sura. Do this, I did tell you, not to give it a congregation. You know, I see it to me, give it to this, sharing younger, you bet, negative for several children, doing a good on to go this one, doing several shower. Oh, Chitter major Sheba Shindo, the Chungu to make it young, my own bear, the Pemba Chimbo, sewer, give a chishi get the Tedariba. Kona oche, that tongue with the cheapest to do she love Nelson.
So here, just to read the little commentary to this, it says that just in the same way that by some kind of poison that would give rise to a temporary kind of sickness, right? If we have to take something that is toxic, it might create some bit of suffering within the body. But if that is able to dispel the kind of poison that would generate the suffering of death, then that is something that should readily be taken. And so too, in order to, why would it be contradictory to endure a little bit of suffering in order to dispel a greater suffering or something that is very unbeneficial in the future? It's only logical to do so.
Oh yeah. That to me say la down me ko sa sto o de. Ya. Da wo de ka se de chen nam go do yin zhou xian se. Yin ni zhou xie yo da. Yin ni zhou xie zha bei se. Dong ye ji jiang pen yi ji pen ba xie ba. Ji mi pen se. O de. Da ka se do se na. Chen nam go do yin zhou xian se ko zha wa kan de xie na. So sam lu gong lu de me liang zhou hu ya da. Chen nam go do yin zhou xian se. De ka se do se na. 이 교회 kunelangbe lunga ki le kewa yukde shera. Ani kulon de mikwa chi yichiyo na ti lunga ki le de mikwa yudure se. Sa chonam ngo do kulon de keshin bure se. Kulon ke meki kulon langbe wange ni soso chawa te ke meki de dure se wara. Chonam ngo do. Kiti ji chonam yunga do ani kulon kewa da mikwa de ngo do dure se. Te wange ni chawa 상이 차별을 해서 처음 것도 인도시 인의 조시라지 심도 조어에서 와 습글론 교환에 개미긴 좋기도 하면 무시 동해 계자 배이게 템버시 버신 무시 동해 계에 거기 동해 또 그냥 보이나요 되게야 템버 용교에서 뒤에 그 동해 중 당도라는 서버시네 뒤에 저기 어디서 뭐라 동해 계자 템베이게 템버시버 시메 펜세 어디 제때부터 펜도 용기랑 된대려 근데 조당 쇼르서 근데 어디 되버데 이 계획 군에 라나 르가길래 개원 주신스 아니 최남 것도 인도시 태과 신변도래 이네 조시 자베 장주 선배 제바 장주 선배까지 동해 기자 샹라 펜버 펜버 데베 이기 펜버 자와치 나가서 펜버 제바 시미 펜버 주르티에서 티코 울롱기왕게 펜버 주르에서 다티 어디야 가르쳐도스나 주르티에서 페난디스도 따로다 세바 생각들에 지 커버했는데 자야다 니마네 메자야다 텐데요라 아니야 매일 좀 매자야 텐데요 다들 산데 샵주 심부지에도 어딘데서 그래 샵하다 제발 소보 파수 샤네 제니 스타치에도 아니 따로다 세발라 소베 다다 메데야서 단다고 샵주 제데 때부터 요마라 다네 대산데 시다 하고 그래 소에도 뛰어보는 말다 니만에는 그 매자야다 텐데잖아 나서 연구라 메테야세 치치에서 펜버리 조르와 자리나서 제만 펜도 전부 여자 단도도서 깔려 유나한테 수업하고도 리나세 다다 신라 다다 신달라 대화다스 펜버 자신부 주르에 다대 동매청세 다다 신라 펜도 자신부 연구이나 대단달 동매청 주르 시텔라 때도 조정인데 수업하자 레그리에서 동해 총세 냠솔렘바 릭바테 지시메데서 미릭바 요마레 릭데서 오라 릭바 다시메데서 쉔데 디숨제 산제제 네루이나 야나 상베 루이노서 어디 담마데 디스토 아카시라 쉔데 나이 루이노서 나이 롭스레스네다 진데티니 롭스요레 China degree yeah, this good enough.
So here then in the next two verses, it establishes that although there's a little bit of suffering in the kind of austerities or the deeds of the great vehicle, it's not right to despise what is going to completely eliminate suffering. So here it says in verse 373, the scriptures maintain the mind is prerequisite for all dharmas. The mind is the principal factor in karma. So if one does something helpful with the intention to be helpful, how could it be unhelpful, even if suffering is involved? So here, whatever action we engage in is preceded by our intention. And so if the mind is virtuous, the actions of our speech and body will be virtuous as well. If our mind is non-virtuous, then our actions of body and speech will be non-virtuous as well. So in terms of our actions, positive and negative actions, the mind is primary. This is something that is the principal factor in terms of what determines the outcome of those actions. And so here it says, again, that prior to all dharmas or all things comes the mind, and particularly from the Mahayana Sutras, it teaches that it is proclaimed that the mind is principle. And so here it is the case that there's a little bit of suffering involved in the kinds of deeds of a bodhisattva. But if those are done with a mind wishing to benefit others, then how could it be that they not bring about benefit, right? These are done with this positive kind of intention. And if intention is really what brings about the results, then here, how could this not be beneficial? And then continuing into verse 374, if one does something unpleasant that will later be helpful, then what about doing something for oneself and for others that is both pleasant and helpful? This is an ancient principle. So here, like for example, in our modern medicine, we could talk about things like actually undergoing major surgery and so forth. But in prior medical systems, you might have done something like letting out blood or burning of some kind. And those sorts of actions or those sorts of things involve a little bit of temporary present unhappiness, right? But they bring about a greater benefit in the end. By doing those kinds of painful procedures, we are actually bringing about benefit. And so here, if it is the case that one needs to, then what need is there to speak about doing something that involves a little bit of suffering, but is actually in the present, but is going to bring about a great benefit for oneself and others? So to endure a temporary bit of suffering in order to bring about a great benefit, that's logical, that's right. And this is something that has been, is the system of all of the Buddhas of the three times. And it's a really sort of the greatest kind of beneficial system we can talk about.
Oh yeah. That's sumba said that they were championship very chungul chawam. Tunda chenpo chituwe ina te chung kange tosu yoba tala chane te yome do something do some yo mare se tunda re do. O te wa chenpo chitu ro chenpo tu le tanche tosu kange tosu do some tene chung le chawa me chawa se. Pina shakju re che kiran tragri sa danga shakju chigme se na shakju che ko tele magane susu moshi che te wa chenpo yonga tele kene de yo mara. O tene se. Te karsi dosa kete te yung tang es kete tewa chung pa le tang ne tanda kange tosu chung yinaya se tewa jashin top yo na se tele tene tewa jashin bu top yo na se wara mene tembe tewa yung sila do tembe tenjung tembe tewa tenjung tewa chung sila sa ala tejo sila ne tewa chung tawar se ta tewa chenpo telia mahamba yonga de samlutane tungi chungjo chi lula kange de tide nyonguna tin nyang ti le tane seba chapo de se ba o de kares na kete tewa chung yonso tawe tewa kya chenpo tongwa juna se tewa kya chenpo tokuyo na ne chanju semba tembe se sem tembe konera tewa pangshi tewa chungu de pangshi kya chewe randa shen le ya shen ju le ya ane tarbe tewa junga sigla se tewa chungu yobe tewa sam tangwa se ta tanda tewa chungu te chimbe rashen le pendo chimbo chogu ne te chedo tewa chungu tani kange re to chu na te soba sha kore se o te shilanya
So here then the next verse is under the third subheading here, which is that for the sake of a great bliss, it's not right to be sort of attached to a little bit of pleasure, to smaller kinds of pleasures. And so here it says in 375, if one will later attain great happiness from forsaking some trivial pleasure now, then a sensible person, realizing that she will gain great happiness, should abandon that trifling pleasure now. So here we shouldn't get caught up on like the little bit of suffering that one might have to endure in order for there to be a greater kind of a benefit. Like if you have to go undergo some kind of a surgery and you think, well, I don't want to deal with that kind of suffering, but that little bit of suffering will say bring you the great bliss of like not dying. It would be worth it to engage in that. It would be worth it to endure that little bit of pain now for the sake of something that will be greater in the future, a greater pleasure in the future. And so therefore, sort of giving up little smaller trifling pleasures in order to seeing that there will be a much greater benefit that comes in the future. Bodhisattvas who are really like steadfast, who are stable, forsake that smaller pleasure in order to seeing that it will bring about the pleasure of liberation in the minds of self and others, something that is much more vast. And so therefore they don't sort of get attached to small trifling pleasures. They see that those are just mere sort of passing things and should abandon that for the sake of something greater.
Oh yeah. Don't do it. Get the damn mission so that they watch him to where you know, Gangi Chunju, that there's so much of Nasigora. Get the damn mission. Then a member dog in Yeshe, I'm Jitazora. Member to Zoge. When mission man is changed, but not a try to do main mission bar. Not a try to do something in a shell sober. Make a sober, cup jail sober to Sura, those quality order. Oh, mission man is changed. 네, 성주를 때네 때 많이 사. 때다 이게 말해. 뒤따고 어디 만들어서. 그때 대화 신배전도 대화 총무 때야 메셔나서. 때네 내 시에 때도 멤버 따게 매 미신 봐서 신발 셔봐. 때야 미륵 타 그래서라. 어. 다음 지나시. 총무전도 시 메타시 송바이는 대화 전부 토해야 된다라 대화 전부디 차년데 대화 전부디 러당주 말이스 야 된디도 와
So then in the next verse, it reads, if you cannot bear this, then healers and such who prescribe bitter medicine would disappear, and that makes no sense. So in order to cure our diseases, sometimes doctors will prescribe medicine that is bitter, or like in doing surgery or some sort of needling, acupuncture, moxibustion, and so forth, things that are in the short term involve a little bit of suffering. But in order to gain a greater benefit, one is willing to endure those, or it's logical that one should endure those. And so here it says again in this that for the sake of a greater pleasure, one should be able to bear sort of losing or giving up a smaller pleasure. Because by that, like a doctor, for example, who prescribes a medicine that really isn't pleasant, that is going to bring about a greater good. And so therefore one shouldn't get caught on the smaller kind of pleasure. Therefore it's not logical or right that one should feel kind of animosity towards this, but rather that one shouldn't give up the greater good for the sake of something smaller.
이제 땅마데 침줄 때네 때만 있을 때 있어 말아 땅만 있어 침배도 침배도 르다는 충분히 차는 데 말이스 르 땅겨 말이스 했던다리도 야 뒤질로나
So Yeah, so here there might be a spelling mistake in one of those verses, but really it just comes down to that it's not logical to feel sort of animosity, that one shouldn't, for the sake of something smaller, give up something that is greater, like mentally relinquish that greater for the sake of something smaller.
오야다 네버리 주바 강이데 랄라르 케베 펜바토스 단단 내가 유나야 강에 요이나 데 풀이야 펜바예네 데 지레바데 케베로데 셈베라 네버리 주바 강이데 랄라르 케베 펜바토스 갑랄라야데 네제이나 데 마음발이야 서버체나 펜도 침부 용했던데 요레스거라 오 디건데데스나 몰라도 디거라 뭐레디샤 근데 샤야 심제 멤버 never juba kaimba tes ta chanju sambar cheniako chimbata kapjine ko chidan nebe regina chanju sambar nebe ke churgu amara kaves to shintone juba tinde kesigis shaya samje member never juba kaimba te chanju sembe cheba chebe tuso lalare kebe pebar tonge ese 동해 중세 잠기 때도 대화 전부 냠버 메자오세 강에 춘주 실 때문에 대화 전부 주에 된 냠주 요마레스 갈래 잡고 그래서 했던단 말이야. 서버쳐 그래서 강이데 동해데. 다들이야 거기 도과고도 아나 원래 동해기랑 시에 탐제도 뻔버셔오시 송바다 gel로시네 아니 그런 단다 동해에 대고로 해서 koa 동해제 랑시르 내서 동해제 랑시르 동해 탐제다 대고래 뒤다달에 타르와 토고래 텐데 셰데도 테카레스고라 동해 탐제다 대고 마르베스 동해야 당동라고 도와서 그래 신나스고라 오늘 동해제 랑시 이베 탐제도 뻥버샤오 시 송바당 겔로스나 테탄 게그마르 레자고라 Chirtan migi sawa taase, tenju tane kula ngas. Chirtan tinte chokumarde, amik selia tinte ko chobu tinte soya te tenju shungshim sambenali yungi ore sigora. Chirtan chokumarde, amik sen kashili chokberu yora. Chirtan migi sawa taase, tenju tane kula ngas. Chirtan la ase, teta yeme jese. 근데 지단이야 맞죠 진짜 이나야 야 미생 그 실이야 초보 나와나요 여러 진짜 싫어 지단 대다 예매지 미지 세나 자주심 바 코아를 내봐 라셰콜라 대 교바시노 자주심 바 코아내는 심장 돈도 제가 코란 가르치는 심장을 팬데 좀 바시지 그래서 내가 코란이야 내가 유나고 내가 그래서네 티 레타니 첨부도 맞고 지금 말해서 질다와 마미게 세와 난가시데 지다 나와요나 야야 깝깝을 까고야 지다 까고이나 깝깝이야 나와요 게래 되게 용해요도 대전에 끌랑 앞에 지다 미게 저 지다다 미세 돌려 개발하고 그래서 지다 미쇼든데 미세 초거든데 쓰기와라 what is doing this?
So here then coming in the next verse, the first half of which says, the wise see that in some cases, what is usually harmful can be helpful. So this is the way of someone who is skilled. They recognize that although in the short term, something might be difficult, but if they see that there is a longer term benefit, then they would engage in that. And so here, bodhisattvas who are able to see the kind of greater good, even if something might seem like it is harmful to the sort of perspective of those lesser sentient beings. When bodhisattvas are engaging in their various activities, some of them who are skilled, right, seeing that there is a benefit, you know, just for the sake of a little bit of suffering, or even though there might be a little bit of suffering involved, they don't allow that to degenerate their great joy. And so really, when it comes to bodhisattvas, when they engage in these kinds of practices, although there might be a little bit of difficulty involved or a little bit of suffering, it's really, we need to make an effort to bear with that because we recognize that there's a greater benefit that comes about. And so here, following that first half, there's kind of a sort of doubt that arises. But someone says, well, if it's the case that everything is in the nature of suffering, then isn't that all to be abandoned? Like we talked about how these lower realms, and in particular, all of samsara is in the nature of suffering. And so isn't that all something that is to be gotten rid of? Doesn't that then contradict the scriptures? Now, here in the second half, it says, all treaties propose both general rules and exceptions. So when it comes to, in general, although something might be prohibited by the Buddha, we should recognize that there are special sort of cases in which that would be allowed. And those who are skilled in means, bodhisattvas abide in samsara solely for the cause of bringing happiness to all, self and others. And so although it is the case that things in general might be, say, prohibited or prescribed by the Buddha, one should recognize that there are differences in terms of the sort of generalities and specific particular circumstances. So it might be the case that in general something is disallowed. However, a bodhisattva with their skill and means could see that a little bit of sort of suffering or pain for someone is going to bring about a greater benefit, and thereby they would do what is normally prohibited, or they might be prescribed to do things and so forth. So one needs to be skilled at understanding the kind of particular circumstances and distinguishing that from the general kinds of rules.
Oh yeah. That did it. Soloka. Did you think it? Take what Chimbo can she less ago. Take what Chimbo do can she less ago. Ninjing went down Chuba Quincy. Ninjing went to Tamakun and it's Chuba Paru Chimbatula Sobatus Shigora. Or the Sama, you should remember down. You should remember about Tombani Tobe, to remember she shiva to Susiora. Semi sushi tell a mercy. Something done by Genetia to merge your marissa, the woman do say, Meratan your marissa, Gora. Oh, Jim Jabaka do say, take by Chimbet and Nick on Chile. Simple Tamjet to me down. Chandy, Jinjing to Tammy, Chanju Simbe, Jabba Yonso, Zoba, going down Shera. Ne Tombani Tobe, shit in my member. Zoba Sheba La, and then semi Shirabjan Sushi Tella, me merite, me Chimeva Merisha. Lana maybe Chanju, Tobe, Top, Zobar, Tella Tangi, take my member to new Madame Bases, take my member to new Cosmasumbe, Rawani to the Logbe, Chanju Simbe to new Sumba. What is one?
So the next in verse 378, it says, the universal vehicle says that all activities should be motivated by compassion, and that wisdom will make them pure, or this kind of pure wisdom, the wisdom realizing emptiness, makes them pure activities. And so therefore, what sensible person would deride this? So here, as it is explained within the scriptures of the universal vehicle, or the great vehicle, that bodhisattvas, all of the kinds of activities that they perfect of a bodhisattva are preceded by this kind of compassion that wishes to free all sentient beings from suffering, and is also accompanied by this perfected pure wisdom realizing emptiness. And so with those two components, who with a mind who is sensible would deride those this great vehicle. And so here this is something that is only taught completely within the great vehicle scriptures. This method that completely to obtain enlightenment, highest enlightenment, is something that is taught completely within the greater vehicle teachings, but is not taught within those of the lesser vehicle.
이제부터 더 걸려서 신도 접시 가발에서 쇼르고 가발에서
Nga ba di dunjudo do gu
뒤지도 이제 데려왜
do gu
야 어떤 거라 어디서 야 어디서 또 어디지 셔나 오메가 다 담마들 단다 가르쳐도서나 우땅을서 고치 베타을서 버티서 야고메 두실라라 근데 동반이들 꼭 하고를 뒤 체다르치를 슬랍거라 년도 때가 같이라 뒤에 가서 신바탕에 대고 고침바탕에 남바 삼아 땅그베게 시여 말아 전주섬 깨네 전주섬 앞에 로야 같이 장사게 류를 처마다 빌로 깨게시기도 류리야 그 처마다 빌로 깨마도 고 신자를 산기요 말아 아티인데 고침바탕에 샘디 숙sem비도 콜 펜도지나 류 침바탕에 갈 펜도기네 섬 가시 또시도네 당기여마도 텔 초동에 용구요 말아 미셈세드 베티 닝두 쳔버려도 셈이 삼을단디 다르르지 겹제 마 겹제 가시 저거네 그만 좀 말루네 단다 마신이 나다 메네 고가 징구 신동해요래 그 콘도게 시기네 도도 가지 어디인데 그 잠바다 닝지 그때 telle자 나서도 시기네 도라 tinderecheneku lule chama tabe loke war so tinde kam tang gurmado nangba changma chanju semke ba changma tang ku bekechi mara chanju sembe je changma tang ku bekechi mara kire oti chilana.
So here, just to give a summary of what's come above, there are those who sort of deride or have animosity toward the great vehicle, saying, well, you're advocating for things like giving away your body, your head even. That's something that's not good. And so too, these teachings on emptiness really are going to lead to a kind of nihilism in which one doesn't believe in anything. And so here, it's necessary to understand that the kinds of teachings about giving away the body are not for all bodhisattvas, but rather it is for those who, having generated a bodhicitta, having developed a kind of resolve and strength of mind, are able to view their own body and giving away their own body like they would giving away a vegetable. They're able to engage in such practices without any kind of pain and suffering, but rather do so joyfully. And so we can see this is when one is so much like kind of overpowered by one's bodhicitta, you are able to engage in such acts without suffering, but do so joyfully. Sort of the way in which someone who is fighting in a war, for example, their anger can kind of overpower the suffering that they are experiencing. They might have many wounds to their body and be really in terrible shape, but they keep fighting and fighting because of that anger that sort of suppresses their thoughts of their own pain. And so this is something that isn't being advocated for all bodhisattvas or for everyone who is pursuing that path, but rather those who have reached a certain level of development are able to do so joyfully.
동반이 있어야 되네. 꾸준매가 꼭하고 꼬나고 체다 연결이 줄 거야라. 어디에 공 미망셔 전에 성게요라. 동반이 있어도 가면도 시시도 랑신게 동바를 랑원에 동바를 시시 매배 소리 시요라. 양때는 딱바를 때지를 봐주면서도 자체 탐지 롱아를 다시야. 지여가 시시고도. 세티지도 고 가시기 당분에 간거 매세잖아. 동바야 가시기 전에 거라. 뒤가 어디서 얘도 얘대로 건 레드 그렇게 말세. 하여튼 있어요래. teacher ko tongba se de kanga me se ni teacher da long yo so semli ane le kyum de so so me ba cha yo da dambu kibu chungu ge kapsu le kyum de ke shi ke ba she de ti to da sung do ti te ji de ba ji wa li ya cha chi sam ro de kyu ke de bu te wa chu kyu mi ke de bu tu me chu wa de ro de ha ko ya tembo ha ko ya de le kyum de kibu chungu kam ne ti sam lu te tembo cha gu yo da tene te tongpa nye she suna le kyumde dan chi te zo le nyeba che ma yung chi ku ya ra te ndu ka so tongpa nye sido nambi nga ra zo samba na shi ti ma re se go ra ta de me ru ma de ta yo ta de lo ga chi yo re se kera nambi nga zo samba na shi ma re se te le lo su ta yo re lo yo ta de re se che ta me na ni te wa nyong ge tung nyong ge me ro ne le kyumde me re 아니 냐와에 다더도 동에 뇽에 매르지 잡아다니지 저어도 다스 가서라 춘나를 쳔마동원에 멤버스 차더라 어제인도 가서라 동반이에서도 남자가 아주 삼을 나를 라와도 줘버리 삼을 고도 소고다 셈다 소화다 두시다 두시도 강가 라테네 아니치 다게 모투 그밖에 섬기면 도와 단단가서 미르와 미 다게 모투데 대서 강가를 뜻인들 미차고라 근데 매버셔 아주 삼르다 딩에 소보를 셈데서 소소 다데 콘졸라 마드레니 즉 라와도 여버를 삼을 고도 하나비 삼을 고다다 뭐 뒤요 말으시고라 라와도 두바랑시 두바 아니 매르에서 매 말에서 본본관을 때니 발을 치 따게 도와서 지치 다시 저두에 강바에 치 따게 도와서 그러나 마인게 차샤 마부실라 때신데 대파 따시 도와 따게 요거 뒤치고 그래서 그라 때네 따바티 여다 되래서 때네 따바 잠지 요거 치고 알아 여러 때네 때니 소고 나서나 나기 시작하지라 선배기우면 두세 기우두세로 콘서 저와제 강가 소소 따게 저와제 볼샤한테 따데 소보 마에게 세메 마에게 로가시아거라 데민도 지스라 페셔나잖아 그 다시들 소보요를 수요라 거라 이셰바 거라 소한도시가가 대sol에 때는 봤다요라 그 수르베스네 마라 셰바르베스네 마라 뭐 사바스로 마시카서 데민도 지 수시가 마인데 디제지 샤기도 자 그때 소보를 짓도 좀 나서나 나기 세트 샤트고요라 어디 삼고라 야 어디 질럽지나 다시
So then when it comes to emptiness, wherein the criticism is that, well, emptiness is really sort of difficult to understand, and it leads to a kind of nihilistic view in which one denies the functioning of karma, cause and effect. And so here one needs to understand that by refuting there being some kind of inherently existent I, or there's no sort of objective, autonomous, inherent existence, but that doesn't mean that nothing is existent whatsoever. One needs to understand how things actually do exist, that within phenomena that are dependently originated, all actions are viable, are suitable or logical. And so here, this kind of understanding of emptiness is something that needs to be approached in the proper kind of a way, wherein one has a foundation of a certainty in karma, cause and effect, and recognizes as well that a phenomenon like the self, the I, doesn't exist in the way that we normally think of it. But to just assert that, there's no self, and that there's no experience of suffering or happiness, there's no karma, cause and effect, that's kind of a wrong way of approaching this. It isn't negating existence existence altogether, but rather a particular way of existing. And so we normally think of there being like an I that is somehow autonomous, independent of the various sort of like, we think of my body and my mind and so forth, as if it had this kind of existence in and of itself. And so when one talks about emptiness, this is really a recognition that there is no such I that exists in the way that we perceive it to, that we think it exists in and of itself. But that doesn't mean that such an I is utterly non-existent, but rather it is something that is merely dependently designated upon a collection of parts, none of which is that actual thing. So we can talk about like, oh, there's Tashi or there's Tundru based upon seeing their aggregates and so forth. But it's not as though when we search for that, we can point to and find the thing that is that. And so here, when we are looking at the way in which the self exists, this is something that it doesn't exist, again, in the way that we have perceived it as having this kind of autonomous, independent existence. But some assert that the self is something which is a non-associated compositional factor, as in it's not associated with either mind or matter, but is something that is a mere kind of designation that exists in a way in which, again, there's a collection of parts, and although it feels to us as though there is something separate and apart from, like our aggregate of form and feeling and consciousness and so forth that exists as this self, it is something that is merely dependently designated. And within that kind of dependently designated existence, it is able to have experiences of happiness and suffering and so forth. And so having the kind of contemplation of the being of a small scope, for example, and gaining certainty in karma, cause and effect is an important kind of prerequisite to being introduced to emptiness in such a way as it doesn't undermine the viability of actions and results, and it doesn't therefore fall into a kind of extreme of nihilism.
Oh yeah, that is. Oh, that is about. About. Ten to us, Tangmal share to it was something of it. Oh yeah. Tashindo Geshe Rab Sabla Kilu Tani Machang Bese. Tatama de Tekwasimbu got to Sanje Kamari Tekwasimbu share tapped and you got Yawame do tapped it Chimbata Savan Gota. So she left the net when you said to Okawuta Cheta Resha Sambiora or Tita Tonda Sutun Shet Edo. No, but you do the share. Shindo Jashi Rab Sabla. Kilu Tangi Shindo Jashi Sigora. Chanju Sembe Choba Shindo Jashi Tabda Shiram Yagaro. Oh, Tenikas, Chanju Sembe Choba Shindo Jashambo. Nelu Tan Rabdu Sabo, Tombani Tantelasgora. Choba Shindo Jashambo. Roa, and Shirab to Tawa to Shindo Sabo. Shindo Jashi Rab Sablasa. Kilu Dangisa, Kilu Netiko Yavuja Makonge. So Shin and Davacha Yavuja. Subsociation and Chande Megre, they are women do some tambunine. A kilo tengera. Kilo tani machambe, telechangi machambe. And the culture said, Tasha Tranam, Mumbai is da Shen said, da Shen said, and Chanju Sembe Sevashin to Kachimbo, da Nelu to turn rub to Saba, Nibutela Sera. And the Kasura, Rabdu Sava. Meva some Jitanes, oh, teach Resa, oh, some time for a tambu in a tane, that you shall go. Some like Kilus in it, tambu in a partane, tane, Kiluches, Telco, some lieutenant and subscription when I got it to Tanduko Chimara. Tani Moya, Tewachimbu, Tanela, Machang Besera. Kilu Tani Machang Besser. Well, yeah, Tewachimbu Tanel Chamanure. Tanda tozo tudu sani lo ta kigra primare sira. Machambe. Oh, kosu so. Machambe kuan de barcheva tene sigwara. Machambe takshen tanam mongba yeshe swa. Ta dan shengi tra pyu du chungwa yin la se. 어디 소소리야 마산 버체 텔고 담도 소소 자 셴라 자 경치 그래서 디노르레스 거라 다시 전남 다시 다시 전남 몽바 예시 셴게 ane kaasura taa pitu chuwa yisi. Susu taa re, shengi taa re, shen lamna shengi taa re dugara. Susu pongpa shengi tere, susu lema shengi tere siwara taa siri sinak. Taa da shengi taa pitu chuwa yina se. Te tabi taa nam mongpa ye taa da dina kekpa chenpo la mebar chido. O tinte kaasa de kuna nima tisam tele meba meba se tangpo nine. Sabse samlo matange. tabdan shirab niga kyachimbo tende kondu machinke. O tezo teni teba shimbo. Dima resi, yaguma resi, sanje kama resi, mombe o tende chigiyo resi, tende labgiyo resi ura. Teni teba shimbo la mebar che tos, teba shimbo la mebar chinge kansa tende shiri resi ura. O, uya techilamna.
So then in the next verse 379 comes a kind of summary of the meaning here that says, discouraged by its vastness and profundity, ignorant persons, due to their confusion, today deride the universal vehicle and thus become the foes of themselves and others. So here, those that assert again, discouraged by its vastness and profundity. So both in terms of the method side, they are saying they are looking at the universal vehicle or the Mahayana as not being the speech of the Buddha. They think that, oh, these kinds of austerities or practices of the method side are too extreme. They're no good. And so too, the wisdom side in the teachings of emptiness fall into an extreme of nihilism. And so when they view this from the start, they think that this is something that is bad. Just merely hearing about the kinds of vast activities of bodhisattvas and the profound meaning of the mode of abiding of phenomena, they have a kind of fear. And those sort of ignorant persons, not really actually having learned the scriptures of the great vehicle or the universal vehicle, disparage that. They are sort of deride that universal vehicle or the scriptures of the Mahayana. This is right from the beginning, just sort of having heard about it, they feel a kind of fear based upon most likely their assumptions about it. And then due to that, they disparage the universal vehicle. And really, this is the sort of supreme, the greatest enemy of one's self and others. This is something that is quite a big mistake, as in it's going to bring about harm to you and others if you explain that to them or tell them, oh yeah, this isn't good. It's going to bring ruin to you. And so those sort of enemies like that, out of their ignorance, then deride this universal vehicle. They look at it and they say, this isn't something that is good. So they're really in a position where they're not ready to hear this, or they're not able to sort of understand it, and thereby come to have this kind of enmity towards it, which in turn brings ruin to themselves and others. They're not really ready to hear this.
Oh yeah. Oh, the kasura. Teba chenpo chida ka marisya da teba chenpo sanje ka marisya da chida ko teba chenpo te yongda se song yu samara. Yongda se pawe temba shi songba na shi tende se chida me tsama le song yu samara. O tikare sene ko tingsan de jine de ko kari ne she de gra. Tawbe she chiba go chiba tamo kari she na ko nye de pa da shego samsanga ra so samishida ko umdwa. Tangi meya ti tu cha tu chi chego samsa chi sara. Tende ko mi chida me ti sangmalya. Tawbe she chiba chego sena. Sosole shenda lawa chego sena na do mara. Kaga she ne ko hendo chi yongu mara ta she na ta tumgi sunde she na tingsan na she ne ko she ne kayo mara mo. Ni me biti ko ti tende ra mara. O tende ka so. Teba shembu saje sungme chita ko yonda che sungu samara. 상하세를 또 집어로 대보시 붙여서 뒤에 산재 좀 되게 처리야 르버를 마보 송에 돼 그거 전부도 왔지 뒤에 코라게 로다 참바시 내가 그러가 지단도 그 타도 될 상마 장고라 송구로 비주 제게 말아 단도 그 당부 그런 로 쳐게 니 지체토에 요 말어 단토에 말아서 부부 충주를 지게 시작했는데 내주 간가 가시 사부들의 깨지 시작하시는 거 시에서게 요 말아 하고 말아 어디인데 그 뒤에 감다 삼바 발라니 지다와신도 경기 유사 근데 결혼 걸때 다들 시에는 되면 되고 진짜시는 그 최신 뭐만 보였거든 나 대사를 파저 감다 삼바다 발라니 계시고 말아 다 시주자 참마시 단다 시에 뉴트라니 소환이 다 가르치고 삼사 저도 했는데도 와 어디서 다 가서 기원게 용자시 뭐 송체 뒤에 기부 총단 정다 시부터 야고 컨디션에 로 내가 세드베 마지막까지 시상게 로 소수치부서 도마면에 검대 지어라 때까지 뭐 시상게 되는 시네 다다고 현다 세지 숙식부시나 아니지 또 자체 나와줘야 차거라 어디 내가 무슨 있어라 어디 질러치나 다시
So here again, there are those who say that the Mahayana or the universal vehicle teachings is not the speech of the Buddha. Now, this we can say was not taught as widely. It wasn't like the sort of turning of the wheel of the Four Noble Truths. It was taught widely, but rather this is something that was taught only to those who would be able to understand it. Now, these days, we sort of teach whatever. There's maybe a sense that the Dharma is going to be exhausted, or there's a kind of feeling that whatever one knows should be taught. But this, again, is sort of a different kind of time. The Buddha, during his time, didn't teach it widely. This is the same with the secret Mantrayana. It wasn't something that he taught except for to those whose mental acuity accorded with the kind of teachings of the Buddha. So it's like if you have a really little kid and you try to explain something really profound to them, they're not going to be able to understand that. They're not going to get what it is that you're trying to say. And so too, the Buddha, knowing the kind of dispositions, the kind of inclinations, proclivities of various sentient beings, taught in accordance with that. And so some who are ready for, who are suitable disciples for the universal vehicle or the Mahayana, he taught this towards them. But, it's not like sort of the way that we are today, where whatever it is we teach about the Mahayana quite widely, regardless of whether it's something that people are ready for or not. But when there are those who can see that, well, it is the case that since beginningless time, my grasping at an I, my sort of self-centeredness and self-cherishing is really the source of all of my problems, and that by exchanging that for a focus on other sentient beings, this would really bring about the highest happiness. There are those that are really ready for the teaching on the Mahayana. But here we should recognize that although the Buddha did not teach the Mahayana widely at that time, that doesn't mean that it was not the speech of the Buddha.
Oh, yeah, that is. Tani ba tekwa chimbe tene kar tu ba sida. Sanje chumde de sumbe tekwa chimbe tene de sanje kar ese. Oti nyende teba ka chil chuku yara. Niba tekwa chimbe tene kar tu ba la sumse. Parshingi choba tenba se. Parudu chimbe choba tenba se. Tensen re ra. Chanchu simbe lam tsokpa tele she ko ba. Tekwa chimbe tene le tene chanchu simbe lam tsokpa tele tene she ko re se wara. 산재기 치외 땅이 들에 좁아지고 산재기 치와 너가 대바침비 남양술은 상제배 남가시고 그 산재기 치외 연대 주게 버셔 산재기 땅이 들에 좁아지고 배 까르 좁아서 다다 못들 숨도 다들 못 퍼진 당부들에 다 가르치는 티신제 때문에 티신제 때문에라 아니 예시 중세 잠에 봐서 특별 신분 도나리아 껴여봐 껴여봐 쉐바시 요마레 스탑도 싫어 가게 잘해야 껴여봐 쉐바 요마레 세워 이 당부들도 특별 신분 특별 신분 때문에 때문에 특별 신분 때문에 요스토바데 특별 신분 때문에 땡겨라 땡메 때문에 땡겨 말아 tena teni teni kachubo, te sonza teni teni pe keshembori, te sonza sanje kare shiki chugwara, ta tambu tiri da. Tambu kare se na, tishinji teni la, nyeba chungse jen, nyeshe, kyo yeba tina sheba tsama, tabda shira kange shana, kyo meba rima to, tikan kyo yungi, she sheba chungse jen yoma resu, o ti tambu tiri do. Tambu ne se, shindan chutum, se chundu sa, samden shirab 미지 다사 담부가시 진보시 수dum시 서버더디 직시도 괜히 준주시 삼대 준주 삼대 시럽시 인지다 인지다 티신 티신이나 대시르 늘라니시 지시여스但你把学个姐妹是让当不讲学这些么的，大概是多少？现在出征是，当地搞的，提前就等于了，你现在吃中式这点没事，没把蛋白了吧？要当不的，现在的出征，说把军队上点，西了的说吧，爬入的先把主当是，其他的那爬进主的些有那些，真的。学别等审结当发现出的了老远个等的，当不全去说都审结我的时候了。第二年度就讲究让节讲究这个时候嘛，特别新别讲究个审结我的时候了，特别新别讲究什，学别等搞是学别等审结吧是，第九年级当年，那么特别新不一样了是，第九年级当年。当年那特别全部人了些，他得就是从小的年纪里送过了，在早把的特别全部等到了，三节就送给去了些了，他当不得的多，搞是的，现在就这么说，真的三点写的，不是出去了，这个年纪大，提前。对，是特别全部得了些个些，现在提起来得了年些继续有的，你把写个的那写起来了，你把写个继续有的中山间面都没什么了，特别全部得了，三节送不去了，要提起来呢。
So then next, we have establishing that the scriptures of the universal vehicle are the speech of the Buddha. And this comes in various subtopics. Here, beginning with kind of its teaching of the six perfections. And then secondly, the necessity of knowing the complete path of great enlightenment from the scriptures of the universal vehicle. And then the need to know the great nature of a Buddha from the universal vehicle scriptures, which is therefore then the word of the Buddha. And so here, the first of these teaching of the practices of the six perfections then comes in three parts, which is first that there's not the slightest bad explanation in these scriptures of the Mahayana. So coming in verse 380, it says, the nature of what the universal vehicle maintains is generosity, ethical conduct, fortitude, joyous effort, meditative stability, wisdom, and compassion. How could it contain a wrong statement? So here, this is really establishing that by teaching the six perfections, it is faultless with respect to both method and wisdom. here, when it comes to the words that give an explanation of the scriptures of the universal vehicle, there's not the slightest fault that can be found in that. And the reason for that is, again, it teaches the six perfections: generosity and ethical conduct, fortitude, joyous effort, meditative concentration, and wisdom, as well as the basis for those activities, generating the mind of enlightenment, the mind of awakening, and the cause for that, which is really the nature of great compassion. That is what is taught in these scriptures. And it is therefore the case that this teaches how to perfect that, or sort of bring it to its culmination, is taught in the scriptures of the universal vehicle, which of course is then taught by the Buddha. So here, when it comes to wishing for enlightenment, or being able to perfect enlightenment, we're not talking about that of a Shravaka or a Pratyeka Buddha, but rather that of a Bodhisattva, full Buddhahood. And thereby, since this teaches all of the methods to be able to accomplish that, why would one then have animosity towards this, or say that it's not the speech of the Buddha?
Oh yeah. Got it. Oh yeah, got it. Nibati. Got it. Teba chimbetene. Teba chimbetene la Yeshe chungsa jimabati sara. Ta teba chimbetene le. Teba chimbetene. Teba chimbetene samba nyamne sama tele tengi ore. Stishe to aniba. Teba chimbo lam sama tele tengi ore. Teba chimbetene tengi. Oh niba nesa. Sutim. 그러니까 진배 생기 전사 수tum다 진배 생기네 또 전시험을 수tum다 신바 수tum대 시알이야 소방에 소시세요라 진바대 시알 펜버트에 소시세요라 수tum 진배 대 진바대 어디 가셔요라 뒤스브샤다 상승이 진바 최지 진바 민식배 진바 진바께 아침부터 하tina 망부용다 수tum 신배 현지 전사 현대 소의 현지 전도야 그게 치치라 진도 세배 당이 계세 다들 진도 당 현대 주발에 진도 당 세배제 되는데 아니 가르스네 당이 계세 당이 람 공내 공도야 배월이야 되고요라 진도 samgura 진바다 수tum라 소바티 현대의 자와들이야 진도 samgura 진도 sam네 고고네 공도야 배그라 진도 세바세 때 세바들의 마음을 동해 당에 세바세를 철랑 가서 뉴질랜드 지면에 세바세 동해 당에 세바 철랑에 벌써 세바세 어떻게 진도 세배 당에 계세 파처 맞잖아 주 내가 제발 소방구라 다들 세바 고민도 마고나 땅마티 신바다 추tum이디 람도 조금 알았지 영토에 엄마서다 신바다 추tum이 냠내데 아무지 하고요나 세바 공부하라 세바 마고는 되니요 말에 죄송하다 진짜 세배 당이 기시 3대 시럽 타르베 주시 3대다 시럽 동반이 고매데 라 타르토야다 신심제 탐제 타르토야 전달을 되니 공부하라 3대 시럽 타르베 주시 근데 티시 전에 되게 대과 친구 돈다서 뛰셔나 어디를 해서 대가들으시나 라지 소소한테 라지 조르고 원트시네 수dim다 친구 근데 리더 라지 그베스 아니 내가 현지다다스 내가 현래야 뜻이야다 라라를 뜻도야다 현지다 조르 지시요면 내가 현지다다 진주다 서봐 내가 볼 때네 당이 기타 주바다 소 지단도 고 현지 만두게 되고 말이다 이내고 shandu trube chajana so ranga chikwa te so oras tengeme. Samden da shirab mi jene she yang da bar trube dole samden da shirab mi de kar chigresna chawande sem nyambar shana yang da ba chita wasna shibayo. Sem nyamsha shana tongba nyete se chu shan teliba yana yang do samlata she 공기 안에 또 내로 때문에 신로라 다음 삼바삼지 공부 세븐시 돈은 무슨 돈이 시오모라 semnyambara shana yanda bachita washindu shebra gyoro shesumbata tarbe gyuyin bes samdenda shiram yiti tarbe gyuyin be pashin chubu tene tepa shimbe tene gyutun tiba yinla se te tene sungna tepa shimbe tene so te chukte li nyamli cheba yina tepa shimbe tonda sungyore nyamsulaga tembe che sungna dasira tembe che sungna tijingi sik sungwan gyuro so tina tembe dode tada dode sungna ni tepa shimbe tade rangi sungyore senar ya tish kuna sumbakare mesh Jusuma
Yeah. So here then next is that the aims of the universal vehicle are taught in the scriptures of the universal vehicle. So here this comes in 381, wherein it says that others' aims are achieved through generosity and ethical conduct, one's own through fortitude and joyous effort, meditative stability and wisdom lead to liberation. This summarizes the universal vehicle teachings. So here, the kinds of meanings that are taught within the Mahayana or the universal vehicle are really the means by which one attains the goal of that. So here, when it comes to the teachings on generosity and ethical conduct, these are mainly for the benefit of others. They have the function of being able to benefit others. Although we can say as well, though, that nothing that is taught within the Mahayana is not for the benefit of others. But here specifically, ethical conduct and generosity. And we should remember that generosity includes multiple types, the kind of material generosity, giving freedom from fear, giving the Dharma, giving love, and so forth. All of these practices are really they are for the sake of being able to attain a higher rebirth and wealth and so forth, but really are for the benefit of others as well. And so too, so others' aims are achieved through generosity and ethical conduct. Again, generosity being focused on giving something to others, and our ethical conduct protecting others from harm and so forth, although they bring about the kind of results of having wealth and having a good rebirth in the future. And then the practices of fortitude and joyous effort. And again, we have the kind of, these are undertaken with the aim to be of benefit to others, but temporarily they benefit you as well, right? One achieves one's own aims in the sense of by practicing patience, the different kinds of patience, particularly those of having like the patience in the face of harm or willingly taking up suffering, having patience with respect to learning the Dharma, or fortitude, I should say. This is going to help protect the kind of other virtues that we have accumulated through generosity and ethical conduct, thereby achieving one's own aim. And undertaking these activities with joyous effort helps one to pursue that own aim. Although again, in general, all of the Mahayana practices, or those of the universal vehicle, are directed toward the benefit of others. In the short term, this is accomplishing our own aims. And here, those practices of meditative concentration and wisdom really really we should understand that by placing the mind in meditative equipoise and coming to know the way that things are, this then leads to the cause of liberation. And so, although, again, these are all practices undertaken for the benefit of others, they lead to these goals, lead to achieving liberation, achieving temporarily one's own aim and the aims of others. And so, therefore, when we think about these kinds of practices that are done, they comprise the entire path of the universal vehicle in these six perfections. And so by holding on to the meaning of those, one then grasps the meaning of the entire universal vehicle. And if one holds on to or sort of gets the meaning of the words that have been taught there, then one is holding the words of the Mahayana. So again, the two later practices of meditative concentration and wisdom. Wisdom, again, is something that we have to develop through repeatedly familiarizing our mind to it by thinking about it and contemplating on it. It's not something that we can immediately see directly like we would see yellow or blue or something, but by taking up that path and cultivating it within our mind, it leads to the cause of liberation. And when combined with the other practices of generosity and ethical conduct, fortitude and joyous effort, meditative concentration, that leads to the achievement of full enlightenment. And so these practices then comprise the kind of meaning of the great vehicle.
Oh, yeah. Chadwe. Yeah, let me show. That is just awesome. Yeah.
So we're out of time for today, so we will leave it there for now.
That is it.
To be sure, I'm really going to make a mark this time. We're going to remember where we were.
Oh, this is that is.
Gen Rinpoche, Geshe, and thank you so much, Katrina, for your skillful interpretation. See everyone at the same time next week, Mondays at 9 o'clock Pacific. We'll close with some prayers.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Lobsang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the three worlds always increase. Idam Guru Randa Mandalakam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
Oh, yeah.
Good.
Good.
Recording stop.